All right, we're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead and get started with Sunday school. Oh, there it is. We're going to get started with Sunday school. We're so glad to have Brother Toby Whitmer with us. And if you weren't here for the first service, I hope you'll plan to stay for the second. It was a tremendous blessing, and so glad to have him here with us. He's going to teach Sunday school now. I don't know exactly what he's going to teach in Sunday school, and we don't care. We're just glad to have him here, and I think he'll do a phenomenal job. And Brother Toby, if you'd come at this time, we'd appreciate it.
Cookies and cream ice cream is the best ice cream. I have to look it up later. Did you take my glasses?
Did not.
You sure? Well, I'm just going to have... Great, my limping sister's going to run. Thank you, brother. He's all right. You have to keep him a while. Well, for those of you who weren't in the first service, we're Toby and Amy Whitmer. I grew up here at Faith Baptist. My family has been here 50 plus years, and we are the founders of Safe Helps Group, a group that's dedicated to the prevention of suicide, suicide awareness, as well as the comfort of survivors of suicide like our family. What you're about to hear, I said this to the last group because I want to say it again. It may initially feel disturbing to you a little bit. You don't have to go there, okay? The Lord is ministering to us in such a good way, a great way. Don't get me wrong, every day is very, very hard. But as I said to the first service, that there's kind of a gasp, and it's going to be natural for you to pull back and just be like kind of, wow. We talk about these things really straight. But I would encourage you to lean forward and to pick up some tools that can help you to understand, but then also to engage with someone maybe in your family in the future, or a coworker, or whatever, to comfort. And this morning we are going to do, we'll kind of switch gears. So our ministry also involves comforting those in deep grief. And how many of you have lost a family member in the last 5 years? Raise your hand. All right, look around, okay? So some of them are very close family members you have lost. Some of them may be extremely close. Some of you may have lost spouses, and some of you may have lost children as well. And how does the church minister to people like that? Because they sure do need ministry. This is what Sunday school is going to be about, how to minister to those in grief. Amy?
So that Wednesday, June 28th of last year, 340 days ago, it was a little bit different than most days. I had a medical procedure that morning, so I was in the family room kind of recuperating on the recliner. Toby was across the foyer in the living room. He was preparing for Wednesday night service, Bible study. Abby was home with us. She lived about 20 minutes away, but she had come the Monday, 2 days before, to stay with us. She was struggling. We knew she was struggling. This was something that she would go through occasionally. So she was staying with us in our house. She worked on the back deck that morning. She worked remotely from her job. She was able to do that. She went upstairs for a little bit, and then she came back downstairs. She came into the family room. She kissed me on the forehead, and she said, "I love you, Mom." She walked over to Toby, kissed him on the forehead. She said, "I love you, Dad." And then she told us she was going to go for a walk in nature, which is something she did often during her lunch breaks. She would go to a nearby park and just walk during her lunch break. That was the last time we saw her alive.
That Wednesday. Do you know that Wednesdays are most popular for someone taking their life? It's very odd. We work with other people in the same ministry who have lost their children, and they lost and husband both on a Wednesday. I don't know what it is about the Wednesday. As the afternoon that Wednesday unfolded, she just didn't come back, and which is not, her and her husband lived like 25 minutes away. They had their own lives, so it wasn't like we were sitting here thinking, she's 28 years old, she's a professional, whatever. We didn't even track it. Our older children had arranged their work, I guess Andrew and Ellie, to be able, they knew she was struggling. They were going to take her out to shop for shopping and to take her to dinner. And they came, they were there. I was running over to the hospital to do something. I came back and they were sitting there and said, "Do you know where Abby is?" And I did not. Amy mentioned that there was an Instagram post, and kind of an ominous, strange post, and it was a picture of a creek, and the music that she put to it wasn't even the right author. It was Johnny Cash singing "He Stopped Loving Her Today," which is weird. Why? Some of you know that song. We then, our minds started going, and we thought she wouldn't answer her phone. Her locations wasn't working. We guessed at where she might be. Obviously, the creek was at a park. We knew her favorite places. We feel like it was a gift from God that all of our family, I called her husband at work, and he went there. We all went there. My son and his wife, she's a nurse at the hospital. She had an evening shift, so she was able, or she had not started working there. They were all there. They were all available to go. And we found her all together, and she was gone.
That was 11 months ago, last week. The grief that transpired for our family after that to this day is something too horrifying for human words. It's what we call complicated traumatic grief.
So complicated grief is a diagnosed grief. It's a specific kind of grief that has complicated parts to it, as well as a time factor of people being able to heal. So think of it this way. Grief is when your grandma dies. Complicated grief is when someone murdered her. Okay? That's it's when trauma meets up with grief. All grief is horrible. It's not a competition. Our grief is very, very, very bad, but all people who struggle with grief, they struggle at the level of what they've experienced so far in life. So to a 4-year-old who loses her hamster, that grief is very, very, very real. And so all grief is rough. All grief needs comfort, and that often comes in the very first few weeks. But then churches, friends, pastors, whatever, their lives go on. But the person in grief stays exactly where they are. Their life does not go on. The griever is frozen in lament and sorrow and loss and loneliness. And this was our situation on an unearthly spectrum level of PTSD, finding her horror, debilitating mourning for months and months. And we'd like to help you as a church this morning to, and your brothers and sisters, and it may be you, in a year or two or whatever, to learn how to minister to those who are in grief. Thank you, Amy. Let's give her a hand. Turn in your Bibles to that great suffering book, the book of Job. The book of Job. And by the way, Job was the first, after 10, 12 weeks, Job was the first thing that I could actually read. I read 2 things that meant a lot to me after those times. I couldn't read my Bible before that. And one was C.S. Lewis, a little book called Grief Observed, at the loss of his wife, who died of painful cancer, and he just wrote honestly. It's a very small book. I'd really encourage that book. And by the way, there's another great book for grieving, Dark Clouds, Deep Sorrow. Some of you may have that book, or it's a very popular book right now. But the book of Job was the first thing I could actually read verses, and it took on a completely different meaning. And I saw things I never, ever saw before. Job chapter 6. Would you stand, please, as we read God's wonderful word? But Job answered, Job 6, but Job answered and said, "Oh, that my grief were thoroughly weighed, and my calamity laid in the balances together. And now it would be heavier than the sand of the sea, therefore my words are swallowed up. For the arrows of the Almighty are within me. The poison whereof drinketh up my spirit. The terrors of God do set themselves in array against me. Doth the wild ass bray when he hath grass? Or loweth the ox over his fodder? Can that which is unsavory be eaten without salt? Or is there any taste in the white of an egg? The things that, which all of those verses are just basically saying, it is obvious why I am broken and hurting. The things that my soul refuseth to touch are my sorrowful meat. Oh, that I might have my request. What request, Job? That God would grant me the thing that I long for, even that it would please God to destroy me, that I could die, basically saying, and that he would let loose his hand and cut me off. Then should I yet have comfort. Yea, I would harden myself in sorrow. Let him not spare. For I have not concealed the words of the Holy One. What is my strength that I should hope? And what is my end that I should prolong my life? Is my strength and the strength of stones? Or is my flesh of brass? Is not my help in me? And in wisdom driven quite from me? And is wisdom driven quite from me? To him that is afflicted, pity should be showed from his friend. But he forsaketh the fear of the Almighty. Look up here. King James is a little rattly on that. So it's basically saying that a friend who sees his brother in affliction should show him kindness. And if he doesn't, he's forsaking that friend. That kind of friend is forsaking the fear of the Almighty, the fear of God. My brethren, verse 15, have dealt deceitfully as a brook, and as the streams of brooks, they pass away. You may be seated. Here's a lament of Job at the loss of his 10 children. Imagine that, 10 children. Imagine that, Amy. You know, we've lost one, and it's devastated us. Imagine 10. And all his possessions. The possessions were nothing compared to his children. He's lamenting before supposedly his close friends come to be with him. Oh, joy. It was a great time when they came. Verse 2 and 3, his grief is heavier than all the sand of the sea. Verse 8 and 9, he begs that God would answer his request to kill him. Death is better than his grief. Verse 14, Job so rightly says that to the person who's afflicted, pity and kindness should be shown from his friends, but the friend who afflicts instead of pity has forsaken the fear of the Almighty. Of course, he is speaking of those 4, quote-unquote, friends who thought they knew so much to help him and were so completely wrong that God made them go at the end and basically apologize, do sacrifices, and make right Job's friendship again. They were clueless. They were hurtful. Grief is a horrible thing, but is an experience that should never be suffered alone. This is what the body of Christ is all about. We call ourselves a family, the church family at faith, blah, blah, blah. You know, we consider ourselves that way, but when push comes to shove, are we really acting as a compassionate and pitiful family should? Pitying family, not pitiful. This is what the body of Christ is all about, to show the law of Christ, to show love. But often fellow believers are either AWOL in these times, or they can actually add to the grief of the hurting person. So I'm going to call a timeout, and I'm going to walk over here for theatrical, whatever, pause, and tell you this. Some of you will find yourself in what I'm about to say. Don't count me as wrong because I'm telling you the truth. Paul said, am I your enemy because I tell you the truth? Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. So when I tell you the truth here, if you have done some of these things, whatever, ask the Lord to forgive you and move on, okay? Just don't do them again, all right? So in these verses, we see how much Job is hurting. And at first it seems like his friends are really going to be a blessing to him. They sit with him on the ash heap for the first 7 days silently. And by the way, those first 7 days were the very best thing they ever said to Job. Nothing. Just it's called the ministry of presence. They were just there with him. And that was what he needed. It's very hard to know the right things to say, isn't it, when someone has traumatic loss in their life or tragic loss, that be a spouse or a child or a parent or whatever, or a miscarriage. or a stillborn, a close friend, it's very hard to know what to say, and that's true. It's very hard not to slip into Christian cliches and platitudes that actually may make their situation worse. What are platitudes? That's when you tell them something that sounds oh so pious, but they are not in the position to be able to handle it, and it's really not appropriate. And it comes across as disingenuous and hurtful. And like basically the person hurting says, like, if you were in my situation, you would never say that because it's hurtful, right? You may ask, how could, quoting something or whatever, sharing something I heard make the situation worse? People in deep grief are often extremely sensitive. And I explained my situation. My brother Ray has MS, and if you know anything about that, the myelin, is that the right word? Sometimes I say mylar. That's what balloons are made out of. It's not right. Myelin. On his nerves, the insulation has deteriorated, so he's very sensitive in certain optically and other places. Okay, that's what I felt like, when we lost Abigail. Like I had no insulation on my nerves. So anybody that would say anything that was just a little, normally would be fine, but was just a little bit whatever, would just, it's like poking a burn victim. It's like, like why are you saying that? It's just how it is. All the insulation of their nerves are gone in the shock of the event, and they have no tolerance for foolish platitudes or cliches or critical things said. That is so often what happens because people don't know what to say, so they say anything, or they grab a hold of some Hallmark card thought and they say it, and it doesn't help. Right after Abby died, we had someone actually send us Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to them. Okay, I want you to just, come on, you can do this. You can imagine with me. We just found our daughter dead in the woods, and you're sending me a verse that all things work together for good? Can you see how that would be not appropriate? Okay, I don't want to hear that right now. I want to mourn. I want to curse this world. I want to curse the broken world. I'm a broken parent. Don't tell me. I know that's true. That somewhere, somehow, this will work together for good. Don't push that on me right now. It's not the right thing. It's not the right time. That's not what you say to a parent or someone in deep grief. It's an inappropriate cliche. Let me give you a sample guide that will help you. This is so easy. All of you can remember it. You don't even need to write it down. Number one, show up. Show up. Be the first 7 days of Job's friends. Show up to comfort them. You have to be present in some form. You need to go to the funeral. You need to go by their house. You need to call them. You need to send them a text. You need to send them a card. You need to show up. We have dear friends who didn't show up because they didn't know what to say, and they felt that it would be better not to show up at all. It's never better not to show up. So they just did not contact us. They did not do anything. They didn't come to the funeral, whatever. Listen, you don't have to show up. You have to show up for that person. Don't stay away. Don't be cold. Don't be distant. Don't allow yourself to say, I might say the wrong thing, so I'm not going to say, or I'm not going to show up, or I'm not going to say anything, or whatever. Just be present to them. The best 2 words you can ever say is all you need to say. 3 words. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And don't allow your mind to keep spitting things through your mouth after that. You don't need to do that. Just show up. Bringing food is always good. The easier to eat food, the better. So we were literally debilitated. Literally all the energy, everything sucked out of us, horribly wailing, crying, whatever. That first day, someone had the wisdom to bring street tacos, which are tacos that are already made. And Amy says to this day, when we're on a Q&A or do something like that, she says, it had to be that way. I could not even have made my own taco. It was wonderful. I could just pick something up and put it in my mouth. When someone is in deep sorrow, they can't do anything. most of the time, but lay on the recliner, lay in the bed and weep. Drop off disposable things. Think practically. Cups, bags, garbage bags. They're having family come in for this funeral or whatever. Really practical things. If they have family coming in, comfort food, finger food is great. Don't take them a meal they have to cook themselves. They have to bake themselves. Ice cream, cookies and cream is amazing. There is a direct connection between healing from lamenting and cookies and cream ice cream. I don't know what it is. All right. Think of doing very practical things for them. So our son-in-law, Abby's husband, his church, they live up farther north. They're members at a different church. His church mowed his yard. Okay? How can Matthew go out there and mow his yard when he's just lost his wife? All right? Practical, extremely practical things. Bring groceries to them. Don't ask them, this is a big error, don't ask them, hey, listen, if you need anything, call me. They will never call you. They'll never, ever, ever. It's never happened in the history of the world that someone said that to a grieving person and they called them and asked for something. They won't do it. You just need to do something for them. Don't ask them, if you need me, call me. Don't do that. I was just with a dear pastor friend. He's been pastor of his church for 30 years, who lost his wife to horrible, painful cancer, just did. We met for lunch. He talked candidly and shared that he was disappointed that many close people did not show up at all to comfort him in his grief. There were very few meals. There's like one meal or two meals that were brought by his church family. He himself, as the pastor, had to order his own flowers from the church for his wife's death. Okay, come on. We got to do better than that. And he was hurt over it. Folks, show up for the grieving. Show up. Show up. So number one is what? Yell it out. Show up. Number two, hush up. Hush up. It used to be shut up, and I felt that was too bad, rude. Show up, hush up. When you show up, say very little. Yes, there is a real chance of saying something wrong, so don't even go there. Just, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Cry with them, hug them, whatever. Don't pontificate. Here is another thing. Do not tell them your own experience of loss. I think that's naturally where we go. We try to empathize, so we tell them someone we lost, or when I did it, when I lost my mom. But don't do that, okay? It doesn't help, and it's off-putting. So don't do that. Maybe just, I'm so sorry, or I'm thinking of you, I'm praying for you. Text them every other day. Just let them know that you're there, but hush up. Don't pontificate. What is natural, but you must not do, is try to fix them. You don't know, so don't try to fix them. That is not helpful. They need their own experience of lamenting. Do you know how much lament is in the Bible? Huge amounts. It's like 3/4 of the book of Psalms is actually lament. Not to mention the book of Job and Ecclesiastes. God endorses lament. Grieving is good. Blessed are they that mourn. Okay? It's good. Let them grieve in their own way. It will not be this. Your situation is not the same as theirs. Don't pull the attention off of their lost one by telling your experience. I'll give you an example of this. We had this happen several times. In the first several days, we took a walk in our neighborhood. This is shocking. But there was a neighbor who we really don't know very well, but she's come walking towards us, and she was actually emotional. And she got to us, and she said, "So sorry, I just heard about your loss. Here it is. I know exactly what you're going through. We lost our boxer last week, and he was part of the family." So we're comparing your dog to the loss of my 28-year-old daughter? We were just shocked. We didn't say anything. We kept walking. We just looked at each other like, that's crazy. I mean, it's literally crazy. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to empathize. Don't ramble with folk wisdom that you have read from some book, with some deep spiritual thought that you've thought. Especially in complicated grief, they can't read anyhow. So I can't tell you, I'm a pastor. I have 800 volumes in my library, and yet people sent us dozen plus books on grief. I could just walk to my library and have all those books. Okay? So, sending, and maybe after a year, send them a book on grief. Actually, Shelley Hamilton, Ron Hamilton's, Amy's mom goes to her church, and she lost a son to suicide. And she wrote a book about it, sent it with Amy's mom, and with explicit instructions, don't read this till next year. She understands. It's just not, yeah. I know that those songs mean so much to you. And I think there's a time after 3 months, 6 months or something to send songs. But Amy literally said, if I receive one more song from someone, so help me. Okay, they can't absorb it. They're in their own lament, their own grief. And I know you're trying to help, but be aware of these things, and especially in the first several months. In traumatic loss, everyone wants to give unique gifts. So we basically have shrines to Abigail. We have a piece of wood that her face is burnt on. Literally, these gifts come in the mail, which I know I'm so thankful for the heart of desiring that. But you need to, and some of those things are extremely special. But you have to kind of temper it. They probably don't need a giant log with the person's head cut out with a chainsaw. Or they don't need a wax, figure of the. You have to think about what is special versus this is just strange. Okay, so that's supposed to be humorous. All right, don't go crazy. So number 1, show up. Number 2, hush up. All right, and number 3, follow up. Show up, hush up, follow up. You go back to your life, but they don't. Don't let your contact with them stop after the first 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, they're still there mourning. They're still hurting. Write reminder if you have to. This is just practical. Write reminders on your own paper calendar or Google Calendar or whatever, every month. Contact whatever. Contact Toby and Amy. Send Toby and Amy. Just whatever you got to do to remember to keep the comfort coming to them. Do it. A simple text. You can't believe how much a simple text means to me, and I get them a lot during. It means so much. I think I got one this morning, and I got one yesterday just from a friend that says, "I'm praying for you. I'm hurting with you. I'm crying for you." I mean, that means so much. Tell them stories that you know about their loved one. So many people, when they say, when someone else mentions Abigail's name, it is like joy. Tell them about when you were out in the hallway and that their loved one said something funny. That is so good. It comforts to hear a story that they did not know about their loved one. Take them to lunch if that's appropriate. I assure you that they will be grieving a long, long time. My mother, just yesterday, she's not here. She has another blood clot in the other leg. And so she's maybe listening, whatever. I just heard her say to someone, and she doesn't say this much to the family. I just heard her say something yesterday, how much she misses Raymond. Okay? They're still hurting. Okay? So for someone that has complicated traumatic grief in that situation, the first year is called acute grief. It is crazy hard. The first 2 years are very tough. However, some people think someone who has lost a spouse or a child or a dear friend should just get over it or just move on. That is not helpful. Don't ever let yourself say that to someone who has lost someone. You need to move on. Whatever. A dear person in our church who I really, really, really respect just told me, okay, we're just coming to the first year anniversary, told me that they're afraid that I'm going to stay in my grief. Yeah, I'm going to stay in it till the day that I die. When am I going to remember or forget the loss of my child? I mean, what a silly thing. Of course. I mean, yes, you can do wrong by hermiting and never go out or anything, but deep grief stays with people all of their lives. The amount that they love that person directly correlates to the amount of pain and the length of their grieving. All grief needs Christian comfort. So shut up, hush up, follow up. We hear Job's pain in the verses, but I want to point you to someone else who had a pattern of hurting with and for other people, and that is a verse that we probably don't meditate on enough. It's Isaiah 53:3. He, Jesus, is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He is despised and we esteemed him not. This is speaking prophetically about Jesus' life that would come. And it says he's a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Well, it can't be talking just about his own grief on the cross. He was acquainted with it. He lived the sorrow of other people around him. He lived the sorrow when people were yelling out, Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me. You know, when he saw their pain and their suffering. You remember him weeping at Lazarus' tomb? Some people get that all wrong. They say he was weeping because of people's unbelief. No, he was weeping because Mary and Martha, his dear friends, were hurting so badly. He saw the pain of death. He saw what it does and causes grief in other people. And he himself missed his friend Lazarus. He wept. He was the man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, our Jesus. He watched them and felt their pain. He mourned with them. And that certainly corresponds with him being our great high priest who is touched with the feeling of our infirmities. It certainly coordinates with, what is it, Psalms 56, that says that God holds my tears in his bottle? Of course. He feels the sorrow and the grief because he's been there and done that. Jesus is the man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Folks, we need to be like Jesus, right? As a church body, as friends, as people who see other people mourning and grieving and lamenting around us. Don't just marginalize it because it wasn't you who lost someone. I have felt that, unfortunately. I'm a professional pastor for 31 years. I meet with people and we plan their funeral and I preach their funeral or whatever, and it can become too automatic because it's not my family. It's not my loved one who's laying in the casket. But guess what? If we all live long enough, we're going to get there. We're going to see people that we dearly love pass, and we're going to mourn, and we're going to lament as well. Over the years, in every church, people will grieve, and we need to be there to grieve with them. I'll point one thing out, and then we're done. Verse number 14 and 15. Job says, to him that is afflicted, pity should be showed from his friend. When your friend is hurting, you need to pity them. You need to pity them. Verse 15, it says, my brethren have dealt deceitfully as a brook. Job was already greatly afflicted. He needed pity and comfort from his friends, not more grief from them, not being hurt by them, not the critique and accusation of them saying it's your fault or ascribing. In our situation, it is like you need to move on or what? No, don't hurt a grieving person more. Don't think you know more about their grief than they do. Please be patient and deeply with deeply grieving people. Don't be demanding. Don't critique how they're lamenting. Don't try to put expectations on them that you think they should move on after a certain amount of weeks. You don't know what's best for them. The Lord does. And their body will uniquely grieve in their situation. In many grieving situations, you may be shocked to learn that people actually who should be comforting add more to the grief. I had a man ask me when we first returned to church, I think it was the first Sunday we returned to church. He asked me, are you still angry with God? He followed up with, because that's going to hurt your counseling ministry. What? I lost my daughter. I'm processing thoughts and emotions that would blow your mind. Don't tell me that. You're adding to my pain. So I leave you with these helps to minister to those that are grieving. There are people around us that grieve. Be like Jesus, the man of sorrow, acquainted with grief and love and comfort. And show up, hush up, and follow up with those that are hurting. Lord, help us to apply these great tools. In the name of Jesus, thank you, man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Amen.